It's our mega FAAB episode. How to churn your roster. How much to bid on the wire. How to know who to cut from your rosters. The Roto-Gut himself, Vlad Sedler, joins us next on Beat the Shift. Welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and with me as always is Ruvain Guy. How are you, Ruvain?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I went to my first Met game in over a year and a half. I went to the Tuesday doubleheader where the Mets won on a walk-off in the 8th inning. That's interesting. I've never been to an 8th inning walk-off. And the 4-0 shutout in the nightcap. Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, and I actually saw you on TV. You were on SNY with Ellen Adair, and I think you also made the Phillies feed as well.
I did. Both broadcasts from different angles actually somehow got me in the picture. Me, Ellen, my wife, and Ellen's husband was there. It was a fun time.
Hopefully
cool.
they got your good side. That's all.
Yeah, they got me from back and front, so I don't know which one is better. But anyways, on to the show here. We've got a fantastic guest. It's going to be a fantastic episode. It's our FAAB episode, and no better person to get than from fantasy guru Vlad Sedler himself. Welcome, Vlad, to the show. How are you?
Gentlemen, thank you so much for having me. Ariel and Ruben, great to talk to you guys. I know it's been a while, so happy to be back on the show.
Yeah, likewise. So glad to have you, and let's just jump right into it. Today's all about FAAB, when to, how much to, and we were talking before the show started here, and one of the things that our show is really different and separates us apart is that we do strategy, and it's not just about knowing the players and knowing who's good and who's not, and the prospects coming up, but just the strategy of it, how to drop a player, when to drop a player, how much to bid. So that's just something that we're going to do today. Starting with waiver wire, let's just go through in terms of timing, right? Because obviously, I know, Vlad, you do a heck of a lot of leagues. What is your timeline for the week in terms of setting waiver wire? Do you start somewhere in the middle of the week? Do you do everything the last minute? Could you lay out that timeline and process?
So I try to keep everything pretty systematic over the course of the year, and especially this season because I'm actually in more FAAB leagues than I've ever had before. So I've got 11 actually, and I usually do about 7 or 8. So yeah, a little bit of an extra workload, and of course I don't like to leave any stragglers behind, and really like to be able to manage all my teams. And obviously I believe that FAAB and free agent bidding is just a really big and important part of the whole process. But for me, I think a lot of it starts with keeping track of everything that happens throughout the week. I mean, not just following box scores, but seeing playing time. How whether if guys are struggling, are they moving up and down in the lineup? Keeping up with transactions, who's getting sent down into the minors, who's losing rotation spots, who's losing key innings in back end innings in the bullpen. And then usually I'll kind of go through each of my teams, probably I would say midweek, later towards the end of the week, so around Wednesday, Thursday, and I'll just take a look and see how I would be setting my schedule or setting my lineups for the following week, and looking to see if there are any just outright drops, just players that I know I'm not going to use, or players that just that are injured or that I'm ready to cut bait with. So I'll kind of mark those guys. And then I'll just flag where I play in NFBC. There's the the watch system, so I can just sort of click on some players that I'm interested in, and then sometimes I'll even just kind of throw them all in a bid of somebody that I already know that I'm going to drop. So by Friday, I already kind of have some idea, some sense of what I'm going to do, and obviously a lot changes over the weekend. And then Friday through Saturday, I'm usually doing most of my research because that's when I'm preparing for the following week and writing my FAAB values column, which usually comes out Saturday night, Sunday morning. So writing that really helps me with a lot of my preparation. And at that point, it's almost like second nature. And then on Sunday, of course, I'll place the bids in the morning. In the afternoon, before the deadline, I'll usually switch up the list of priorities, move guys up and down, put some bid numbers in it, and I'll always walk away. And then maybe a half an hour before the deadline, I'll kind of give it all a sanity check and just make sure that I don't have anything too high, too low, and just come and look at it with a fresh sort of state of mind.
Right. And interesting that you said there is that you're looking at how you would set your lineups for next week. And I think what gets lost a lot is people aren't looking at the very week-to-week nature of a lot of weekly leagues, because that's what it is. And in terms of streaming players in or saying, this player I'm not going to use this week, I'm not going to use next week, might be a spot to cut bait with a player because that roster spot is possibly used better for somebody else in the immediate short term. Is that the way that you look at it?
I mean, absolutely. The way that I feel that it needs to be approached is people, especially it's you can tell in the type of questions that people ask. They're always asking, who do you like better, player X or Y, rest of season? And I personally don't like to approach things that way. For me, it's especially if it's somebody towards you're in a 12-team league and it's a couple of guys that are very similar, somebody that could be dropped, someone that could be picked up. I mean, it's really hard to answer those type of questions without context. It's being able to see someone's roster, understand what their needs are, maybe categorically, and looking at the upcoming schedules, like maybe not just the next week, but just in the next month, perhaps. Like, I think maybe going to some AL East parks, going to Coors a couple of times, things like that. And for me, you almost have to compartmentalize. It's not this one long season. It's these 26 mini seasons in a way. And so I think it's that important balance, that approach between keeping your categories and your overall balance in mind over the whole season, in addition to looking at things a week at a time.
So, Ruvain, I'll ask you this: on average, how many pickups per team that you run do you usually do, and maybe does that vary in terms of league size or in league depth or league format for you?
I think it matters more on the construction of the team and what's going on for that following week. Typically, I don't like making so many changes. I don't like overhauling everything all at once. Maybe one or two, possibly three pickups per week at most. But, I mean, when you draft a team to begin with, you draft, let's say, 30 players. If you draft 30 players, 23 on 23 starters, 7 bench, whatever it may be, those last 3 or 4 spots, when you draft them, you have to have in mind that you're going to continue to churn them over and over and over again, and you have to leave those 3 spots open. So I'm looking to try to upgrade my roster at all times, number one, especially when it comes down to those last 3 spots. Number two, it depends on what's going on with the injuries. Injuries are abundant, as you'll see in my report later today. The injuries are crazy. There's so many going on, and there's so many holes to fill. So it's hard really to pick up one guy that really want, because you want to have to fill a hole somewhere else. So you try not to be over anxious on getting all these hot guys, because you want to make sure you have a valid roster actually for the following week. So what I would normally do is on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'd watch what's going on. I'd watch everything, just enjoy baseball for a couple of days. Then by the time Thursday rolls around, when I start getting my own article ready about the injuries for the coming week, I see what's going on and I get a little more idea of who's still playing, who's getting the playing time, and who's not going to be there, and who's going to have to change, because a lot of rosters, especially in NFBC, the hitters open up again and they close again on Friday for the weekend. So when you're looking at that also, that has to play into it also, because you're seeing already, okay, I have this hole, I have that hole, then I'll know exactly what I'll need to pick up later on.
So, Vlad, can you tell me as a percentage of time, or maybe rank these in terms of what you find yourself doing most? And of course, I'm saying this very generally, because obviously every team that when you pick up players is going to be very different. You might be suffering injuries on one team and you might not on another. But very generally, because you play in so many leagues, what percentage of time do you find yourself picking up players to either fill an injury, an issue on your team? Maybe there's a hot player that you want to pick up that looks great. 3, matchups that you see a good matchup the following week, and 4, maybe a prospect that's coming out. Like what's your pecking order, and what rough gauge of time are you picking up these players?
So it's mostly, I would say, for good matchups in the next couple of weeks and filling players due to injury. I would say that's a bulk of it. I think as I get older and wiser, I'm doing less of the trying to pick up the hot prospect, because we've seen it numerous times. You remember Austin Riley a couple years ago, Carter, Kai Boom. I always forget if it's Spencer or Carter. I think it's Carter. the one that didn't retire.
Carter,
That's
yeah.
not the catcher. Yeah, and there's these guys. They mash in the minors, and then as soon as they come up, even they'll maybe mash a little bit more, and then there's that big adjustment period where most of the time these guys just go cold. Not everybody comes into the league like Trout, Jordan Alvarez, or Correa, and just start mashing consistently. And so I'm just really wary of prospects, I guess, especially in NFBC. A lot of times you can't pick these guys up until they are actually have played a day in the league. And, and even then it's, there's always a premium to be paid on those guys. They're going at the price of, like closers are going sometimes when a new closer pops up and they're going for 25-40% of someone's budget. I tend to not chase that. I'd rather just have the money and just, grind all season long. And that's something that I've noticed a lot of the best players have done over the years. And I've sort of adapted that strategy. And then same thing with hot players. I'm always careful and hesitant because there's also a premium on the hot players. Somebody coming off a week of hitting, 420 with a few homers. I'm looking at the context of that. Like, were they playing, maybe were they a lefty facing a bunch of righties? Were they, playing because somebody was out due to injury? Like, what is the context of this player getting more playing time? And maybe they were facing, Pirates pitching and Tigers pitching or whomever, and they just had good matchups, and now they're going to face, DeGrom and then the Marlins pitchers or something like that. So the context of that matters so much. So in that respect, I'm really careful with the hot players. So I would say for the most part, it's the filling for injury and the good matchups.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that. I will add it for the hot player, though, that it really depends on the format and the depth. In a 15-team league or in a mono league, if you see a guy that's getting playing time, that even though and they're hot, I mean that's there's a bigger need to add the player because there's less available on the waiver wire. If you're in a 10 or 12-team mixed, the hot player means less. Right, it could just be a phase. There'll be other hot players that come about because the waiver wire is much more rich. It's much deeper. And just to also add to what you're saying, you do have to take a look at the hot player factors. If they're gaining playing time, that to me is a great sign, as opposed to they just hit a barrage of homers this week. That could just be something lucky. So you do have to look at the context of how they're hot and what they're hot as to whether you want to pick them up this week.
I actually want to add about the prospects, though. Also, when it comes to the prospects, there are 2 times a year really when the prospects are really out there, and that's usually around the end of April when the Super 2 time comes around, and after the trading deadline when more prospects come up and replace the players that have been traded away. So if you really save your money for the prospects around those 2 times a year, you don't need to spend so much money on the prospects other times a year because those are when the main prospects are going to be coming up.
Yeah. Right, yeah, 100%. Question to you, Vlad. You talked about you're marking players for I can drop them. How do you decide when to cut bait with a player, when to drop them? Is it because they're just really performing badly and they don't have a long track record? Obviously, if they're injured, that's a reason to do it. Another reason could be you're not going to be using them in another couple of weeks, especially pitchers. You're looking at the next matchups. I'm not playing him this week. I'm not playing him that week. If not, why am I holding him? Like, what are some of the reasons that you're going to drop a player, and how do you decide?
I mean, yeah, you kind of you hit on a lot of them there. I obviously in 15-team leagues, and I think most people know this. People that are playing both 15s and 12s know the difference. And in 15s in general, your targets are much there are fewer of them. They're of higher priority, I guess, in a way, and everyone's kind of going after the same targets. It's very shallow in the free agent pool there. In 12-teamers, those are some brutal decisions, and I know a lot of people, even a lot of really good players in NFBC have even stopped playing 12s just because they love the 15-team format, and there's just so much work to do in those 12s. But that's the toughest part is figuring out when to cut bait because a lot of these guys are so similar in a lot of ways. But yeah, I mean, for me, if it's with pitchers, I'm looking ahead at the schedule. If it's somebody kind of on the cusp of my roster and sort of on the borderline of being 10th 11th pitcher on my team or on in FAAB, I want to see, does this person have staying power for me? Is he somebody that is going, like a couple weeks ago, everybody was looking at Rodon Shoemaker, Steven Matz. Like, these are guys that have done it before. These are guys that could potentially, they look good in spring, increase velocity. They're healthy now. These are guys that have long-term potential. And then there are the other type of guys like that are just new on the scene that we don't know much about. The Tyler Widners, Bruce Zimmermans of the world. Like, you just kind of have to go with it by feel. Like, sure, if you cut one of those guys into 15 and they end up being, the next DeGrom, oh well, you lost them. There's nothing you can do about it. But in 12ers, it's really tough because a lot of times figuring out who to drop is almost harder than figuring out who to add. For me, and a lot of times it's avoiding your own sort of personal biases and kryptonite. Like, for example, I love Tyler O'Neill, but I don't know why, right? Like, he's, just bad plate discipline. He's got so many good tangibles, so many good skills where he could be good if he applied himself, but it's just not working out for him because he's just so impatient at the plate. And so I then sometimes need to weigh, all right, how long can I keep waiting around for it? Am I just keep buying in on him because he's burned me in the past and I feel like he owes me? So a lot of those sort of personal biases we need to be able to put to the side. In some cases, that was made easy for us this week because he hit the injured reserve or injured list. And so, in 12-teamers, he becomes an easy cut. In 15-teamers, that's a tougher situation. For example, in a 15-teamer this past weekend, I'm thinking there I've got already Luke Voigt on an IL, waiting to come back sometime in May. I've got Bobby Witt on this team that I drafted and I'm holding, and I don't want to cut him. And then I've got Carrasco. That's already 3 stashes on a 7-player bench. That's already too many. So at that point, I'm like, okay, in this case, Tyler O'Neill has to go. So just kind of going on a tangent there, but you know what I mean? It's just sometimes really, really tough decisions.
Yeah. I think the general, very quickie rule for when you can't cut a player is if you're going to cut a player and that guy is going to be gobbled up in 2 seconds by anybody the next week, it's probably a bad idea to drop him. If you think that the guy is going to survive, even just 2 weeks, you can drop him because theoretically you can pick him up next week if you want for free. So that's a very quick general rule if you ever want to come to a bind. Anything to add to that, Ruvain?
Yeah, the litmus test for pitchers. If you have a 2-star pitcher like me and you are, we have Ryan Yarbrough on our team, on one of our teams. I think it's a 12-team or a 13-team league, and he was a 2-star this week. And we are considering not playing him when he's a 2-star pitcher. If you have a guy, he's on your roster and he's 2-star for a week, and he was playing I think it was the Rangers and the Yankees. If he's 2-star and you're not playing him, then there's no reason for him to be on your roster whatsoever. Because when else are you going to play a player like that? Yes, he got beat up by the Rangers, and he's probably going to get beat up by the Yankees as well. But at that point, if you're not going to play a 2-star pitcher who you probably drafted like a Ryan Yarbrough, what are you going to do with him? I think that's the type of player that could be dropped.
You know what's funny in the way that baseball works is now that Yarbrough got blasted 2 starts in a row, and then now watch him throw like a 8-inning shutout against the Yankees.
That hopefully he'll be in your lineup still while that happens, of course. I want to talk about the picking up, and you're talking about matchups. You're picking up from matchups. You can call it streaming if you're going to only hold him for a week or so. What are the things that you look at to decide this is a guy I want, he's going to have a good week this week? We all know plays in Colorado. Everyone knows that one. Although, I don't know, the Rockies lineup is not that great. Maybe pitching in Colorado this year isn't as bad as you think. Well, I'll let you answer the question, Vlad.
So for me, the best thing that I'll always do is I'll just look at who the teams are playing in the coming week. I'm looking to see who's got 7 games. Maybe sometimes there's some double headers and there's 8 games in a week, which teams are playing 5, and then digging deeper within that. And this is what I put into the FAAB Values article is, all right, how many righties, how many lefties, who's affected by that sort of thing? Like, for example, this week, the Giants, or next week, are going to get 7 games, and 6 of them are slated as of now, granted no rainouts, 6 of them against righties. That's a good opportunity in a 12-teamer to probably pick up Alex Dickerson. There could be good timing there, and somebody that's going to be in the lineup predominantly against righties is a good thing. Where on the flip side, maybe you have Austin Slater and in a 12-teamer, and he's fungible, and you cut him for Dickerson, and that's just it's that kind of continuous churning and burning. I'm looking at handedness. I'm looking at the strength of opponent. Are they going to face like the previous example? Are they going to face, DeGrom, Stroman, uh, and then the good pitchers on Miami over the course of the week, or are they going to play Kansas City and Detroit or whoever? And to me, that makes a really big difference. And then I always give priority to the AL East for whatever reason. I mean, it's not for whatever reason, it's for a very concrete reason. Like, those are phenomenal home parks almost everywhere, maybe with the exception of Tropicana, where that's a great place to stream hitters. I mean, last year I took a big time advantage of players streaming them in Boston, because Boston had they didn't have Erod, they had a horrendous set of starters and an even worse bullpen. And the same thing with Baltimore. And so you just always had a good shot at teams getting involved in shootouts or in scores where there were going to be 10 plus runs scored in those situations. So I would always sort of optimize the potential for my hitters to score a lot of runs. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to pick up someone and stream them to face Marlins and Mets pitching, basically.
Yeah. No, I agree with everything you said. One question, though, about doubleheaders. It's not like doubleheaders of 2 years ago. A doubleheader is 14 innings instead of 9. And who knows if they're going to play both ends of the doubleheader. So, to me, that's not an advantage. I would almost say it's a disadvantage.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, you're right. That's exactly. A lot of times these guys aren't playing both games of the series. So, but either way, if 8 looks bigger. So,
Right. I'm just saying that the proportion bigger is not as much these days, because you're literally getting 5 extra innings. It's there you go. Do we miss anything, Ruvain?
Yes,
I think Vlad got a lot.
You missed the weather. You got to play the weather also,
weather.
Especially in April. It's freezing in Detroit. It's snowing in Colorado, and on the East Coast this whole week it's been raining. So if you just look at the weather a week ahead for certain matchups, like if Boston is playing in Boston, if the Mets are playing at home, if the Phillies are playing at home, if the Nationals are playing at home, and you see that it's going to be really cold, you know what? You may be more better off to get a pitcher there, especially if you don't think it's going to rain. If you can get a pitcher there, because hitters usually don't do that well in cold weather, barring the occasional grand slam in the snow, which you see occasionally, like Hideki Matsui a couple of years ago. But otherwise, you're not really going to see that much offense when it's freezing. So if you pick up a player in Detroit, like let's say you picked up or you started Matthew Boyd, he's been playing in Detroit and he's had a renaissance right now. Is it really him, or is it the cold weather affecting the hitters? There could be a give and take with that as well.
Yeah. Ruben, are you looking at the injuries? So, if you have a pitcher that you're considering, are you looking at, hey, this team is injured and hobbled now? Are you considering that at all?
Are you talking about the Blue Jays, or are you talking about all the teams?
Oh, my goodness, the Blue Jays. Something going on there. It's just everybody's getting injured.
Yeah, you always have to look at the injuries, because especially early on, you're going to get a lot of muscle injuries, which we've already seen with obliques, with groin strains, with hamstring strains. And you have to keep up with this, because there's a constant flux of players going in and out of lineups. If you're doing DFS, it's a complete headache, because you don't know what's going to happen one game to the next. And especially when you have these double headers, if let's say a team has a double header and someone tweaks his or gets hit with a pitch and they miss a couple games because of that, you have to be up on this stuff. Otherwise, you're going to get screwed. You're going to end up with a lot of empty roster spots during the course of the week.
Let's talk about 2-start pitchers. I know, Ruvain, that you're big on picking up pitchers who have some good 2 starts, get the extra innings. Of course, it could backfire if the pitcher has a pretty crummy week. What advice do you have for when to start picking up 2-start pitchers, in terms of, are you doing this in the beginning of the season? Are you doing this midway, in an emergency, if you're really down strikeouts? Like, when is your rules for starting to be more conscious of getting those 2 starts in there?
I think it's probably around June or July. I wouldn't do it yet, because you don't know what you're going to get out of the pitchers so early on in the season. They can blow up your ERA. They can blow up your WHIP. This is not the time yet. When you get later on in the season, you'll see if you need strikeouts. If you need strikeouts, then you go with the 2-star pitchers. If you don't need the strikeouts, then you go on the waiver wire and get a middle reliever and throw a middle reliever later. But it's June or July. I think that's usually the time when you start to see, oh, I'm behind in strikeouts. That's when I need to build them up. Oh, I'm starting to fall behind in wins. That's when you need to build it up. I think it's still too soon, and you don't want to risk blowing up your ERA and WHIP this early in the season.
Do you agree with that, Vlad?
Obviously, if you're streaming 2-star pitchers in April, that kind of means that you have some issues with your roster to begin with, and I think it goes back to preseason and to draft season, where people that are like waiting on pitching or punting pitching, you're going to end up getting yourself in trouble. Like you need to be able to build a balanced roster so that you're not already beginning that process of streaming two-start pitchers early on in the season, because it's just human nature. Like you see two starts and somehow this smart part of your brain just cuts off and you're like, oh, this kind of looks like a tough start. It's kind of appealing. Maybe I can hold him for the year. And then he gets blasted in one of those starts and you're like, okay, well, duh. I mean, my instinct kind of knew that, but I did it anyways. And then, you tempt that fate early on and you're probably going to end up doing it a lot later on as well. So if you got a bunch of injured pitchers to begin the season, you started off with, Carrasco and Sixto Sanchez, and you lost, Anthony Bass and, whoever. Yeah, sure, you could be in a world of hurt and you may be in a tough position where you have to, stream a little bit, but it really goes back to drafting strong and keeping pitching in mind so that you have those aces sort of anchoring your ratios and you don't have to mess around with those two starts too early.
Yeah, but I tend to look at what's going on in the two-star pitcher world from day one, even though my tendency to put one in there is lower in the beginning and it's greater later. I'm still looking because you never know. I'm actually even more concerned not just with the following week. I'm looking at 2 weeks from now because I want to pick up pitchers for free. Right?
Yep.
There's always somebody who wants those two starts, but 2 weeks from now, there's less. And you can pick up some good pitchers. I picked up Johnny Cueto last week for some good starts. 2 weeks, 2 weeks, which would be next week. Now he's injured; he probably won't pitch. But that's the kind of thing you want to go in advance to get that. And I'm looking at that from day one. If I like the start, why not put that into the rotation there? How does having minimum bids affect FAAB? So there's some leagues that allow you to have a zero minimum bid and some that require you to have a $1. There's also leagues that have $100 seasonal budget versus $1,000. Does that affect the way that you would bid, do you think, Vlad?
So it's been a while since I've been in any sort of bidding format other than NFBC, which is pretty much standard dollar minimum and $1,000 budget. Yeah, I think I still do some $100 leagues in football, but I really just try to play all one style just to not confuse myself. But obviously, back in the days, played a lot on home leagues on Yahoo and did the Fantrax leagues, and obviously a lot of really great sites on there. The $1 minimum kind of keeps you a little bit more in check, where you just can't have sort of like a free for all and a less disciplined mentality. But I don't have too much of opinion on that. Besides that, with 100 versus 1,000, you just need to basically mirror it. If you're playing in leagues in both, then you just kind of have to consider it, almost similar. And it may seem like a 1,000 will last you a lot longer, but it may not necessarily. You can literally burn through either of those really quickly. It doesn't really matter what the number is.
I mean, I think it's different with the 100 and 1,000. I think that the bidding is slightly lower on the 100 because you have less to work with. There's not much of a difference if I bid 34 or 35. The one extra dollar difference in a 1,000 league is just for me to basically to randomize my bidding so nobody knows what I'm doing. Or if I think that some guy is bidding on the 4s, I'll bid on the 5. Can't do that with 100. You have to bid the appropriate amount every single time. The 0 versus 1. 100%. And when you have just $1, and especially if you're in a league that has a 100 budget and $1 minimum, those bids are precious. You can only make 100 pickups in the league at the very most. So it's going to be tamer, and you have to be a lot more wiser when you have the minimum bid, I think. Ruvain, how about you? I know that a lot of your leagues are home leagues that are zero minimum and $100 budget.
Yeah, you have to base it on a percentage. If you're going to, let's say, bid in $1,000 budget league, let's say you're going to bid, let's say $100 because you want to get a closer or something like that. Then in a $100 league, you should bid $10. It should basically be the same percentage, because you know what, you want to allocate the same amount of budget for each thing that you do. So just like Vlad said, if you mirror the 1,000 to 100, if you do the correct percentage, that's what you get. And when it comes to the zero minimum, I'm in some leagues that have zero minimum, and they're great. You know why? Because you can get anyone for free, and you can be as aggressive as you want early, because people will run out of money and people will be putting $0 bids later on, and you may not get the hammer later on, but you'll still have the ability to pick up for injured players later on if and when you wouldn't have it if it was a $1 minimum bid.
Yeah. Just as an aside, to go back, since it just popped into my head about 2-star pitchers, if you're playing in a head-to-head league, especially a points league, you want to do 2-star pitchers day one. That's something that's really important, just the inning. So, yeah, that would be big. All right, anyways, back to the FAAB. Let's just we talked about what to pick up, who to pick up, and who to drop, but I know a lot of the ingenuity is deciding on what to bid, the actual dollar amount, and it's not just willy-nilly. Hey, should I bid a lot? Should I bid? You need to have a plan. You need to come into the year, I think, to have a plan. How are you budgeting week to week? How are you going to bid on prospects? How are you going to bid on hot players? How are you going to bid on closers, right? You're better off coming in planned, right? Don't just, I don't know, what do you think's going to go? So let's try to do a little bit of that today and talk about what you should be bidding in your leagues, whether to win a player, to bid so that you keep players honest, and so on and so forth. Do you have a general approach to budgeting, Vlad? Like, do you come into a season and say, I'm going to put, X dollars a week for weekly injury needs that I have to swap out players, X dollars for, if I really need to splurge, I'm going to have a budget for that. I need to save $200 for the last month. Do you have a budget plan coming in?
It's loose. I think it's really difficult to do because I feel like each season is its own sort of unique animal, and your teams may have different needs. One thing that I make sure that I do is I try to go into a season with what I feel are enough closers, and this season is ever more so is that true because just right off the bat had a team where I thought I drafted 4 closers in a 30-round league in FBC, and 2 of them lost their jobs already: Rafael Montero and Anthony Bass. And all of a sudden, because I never want to be in the position where I'm battling and having to fight people for closers that just came on the market and be spending $250, $300. I've been through that. I've been burned before. I remember Jacob Barnes from 2018 came up and got a job, was expensive. Everyone paid for him, and then 1 save, and that's it. People spent on Jose Alvarado that year, and he basically got 1 save, and not another one another year. So I want to set myself up before the season, so I'm not getting into those bidding wars. From a week-to-week standpoint, I really have to play it by ear. I never go in saying rigidly I'm gonna. I can only spend X amount or Y amount, but I try to keep my ear to, or my pulse on things and what somebody is worth to me, what someone is worth to pay. But for me, the most important part is setting is what I think a lot of people may not do is figuring out the exact priority of my conditional bids. If I don't get my first guy, where most likely a lot of people are going to be in competition for him, what is my contingency plan? Who are these guys behind them that I'm bidding? Who do I want to set myself up to get, in what order, and what are those guys worth? And a lot of times it's a good sanity check also, because it sometimes makes you realize that these $200-$300 bids on somebody coming off a hot week, is this guy necessarily worth it when you can get maybe somebody similar for $20 or $30? So it kind of really puts things in perspective. So the one thing I do make sure to do is I do like to save money down the stretch. I like to be able to have that hammer. And I would like to be able to, stream 2 starters if I need to for wins and strikeouts, be able to attack steals or whatever else I need. So I'd like to maybe say for the last 6 weeks after roster expansion, 5 weeks of the season, I'd like to at least have $100 left.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that conditional bid stuff that you're talking about. I always consider when bidding, you have to consider the market, what you think a player is going to go for, but also what kind of return on investment you're going to get from your dollars. I mean, you have a limited number of FAAB dollars, so ideally you want to use them wisely, that you get the best bang for your buck. If you notice that there's 5 similar players out there, maybe not the best one's going in the market you think for 80, but there's some similar ones going for 20. certainly you might have a better return on investment if you bid on the 20. So what would you do in that case? Would you bid maybe 50 for the top guy just to say, hey, keep everyone honest, and I'll take a 50 instead of an 80 for the market to get that top guy, and you know what? I'll put a couple of 15s the rest of the way so that whatever it is, if I don't get that top one, I'll just get a good return on investment for the rest of my guys. Is that something that you're doing?
It is, and I feel like I'm doing that a lot. Actually, I'm noticing that a lot of times I have some sort of instinctual bias against whoever the top guy is. Whoever I feel like maybe it's not
Right.
always justified, doesn't always work out. But like 2 weeks ago, when Julian Merriweather, man, he's looking hot, man, he's the closer, and this and that. I just wasn't in on it for whatever reason, or at least I wasn't in at that price. So I would keep him on his bids, knowing that he probably is the top guy and I wasn't going to get him. I would put something in there, but I would set my conditionals up. I'm like, okay, so maybe I won't get these potential saves here, but let me see who I can line up. What other shaky closers are there? Who are the guys behind them, and who can I throw in my my backup bid, and hopefully to get lucky. And of course, if that happens for many weeks, and you just there's that balance. Like you have to be aggressive, but not too aggressive. But things do fall in your lap a lot of times when you play it that way. When you do the keep them honest, but then you really prioritize your conditionals.
I really can't remember a closer situation on one team that so much draft and FAAB capital was spent on before week 2. Like, think about it. Yates, then Romano, then Merriweather, and people who also bid on Dolis. Like, how much FAAB and draft investments are just on the Toronto closer situation? And by the way, we still don't even know what it is after week 2.
Oh, well, Romano just hit the IL.
Yeah.
So now this week it's going to be Dolis bids. Unless somebody else steps in and grabs a save. And then, hey, it's crazy. It's crazy. We need, you especially in NFBC overall competitions, you need to get those saves. But you know what? Through years of experience and us playing, like we kind of realize that they always kind of pop up in the market at some point. Like people slow down, and you don't have to be 90th percentile in saves. If you've got a couple other guys, I've got a team with a slow start in saves with like Will Smith and Ryan Presley. I'm not that worried. I feel like that the team will be okay. I lose one of those guys, yeah, sure, but I don't want that to affect my bidding. Like just because I lost Rafael Montero doesn't mean I'm going to go, like, I don't even know, is it going to be Graveman? Is it going to be Middleton? They split their saves on Thursday. Either guy could be it. Like a lot of times these managers don't even know yet what their situation is. That's why a lot of times they're playing it by committee.
Yeah, and I think it also depends on the desperation of your team. Ruben and I have a team where we're down to like one closer, so we put in some bids for Jake Diekman, and I usually don't spend a lot on players early, but I put the bid in 140 or whatever it is to win it. Ruben, what is your general, or do you have a general budgeting of FAAB for the season approach, or what do you do?
Basically, for the first couple of weeks of the season, I try not to do that much high bidding because I want to see what the league's going to do. You can learn a lot for course in the entire season how the first couple of weeks of the FAAB goes. You'll see who's aggressive. You'll see how much money is being spent for a closer. You see how much money is being spent for the top guy. And I think you can learn so much from that if you just wait for 3-4 weeks when all these guys have spent all their money and you can see the trend in the league, then you can jump on the guys. Then you know how much to bid. You can see maybe some trends of some teams, some players in the league, how they're bidding, whether they're only bidding on the ones, whether they're only bidding on the twos, or something like that, so that you can try to outsmart them during the course of the season.
So the devil's advocate on saying you shouldn't bid that much early on, the biggest counterpoint is, well, if you pick a guy in the first week of the season, you have him for 26 weeks. If you spend your money in the middle of the year, you only have him for 13 weeks, and if you hold your money till the end, you may not even use it at all. Does that, Vlad, how do you counter that? Is that a thought where you say, well, you really should be spending money early? In the first half a year, you're not spending 50% of your budget. I'm gathering you're spending more for that very reason, right?
It's there's a lot of times there's a replacement value for someone, right? If somebody's performing well for you in your outfield 4 spot and you pick someone up midway through the year and they take over when that guy is injured, you're still sort of getting the full market value for that slot. And then other times, it really depends on feel. When you've played for many years, you just kind of know, you sort of get a feeling on something, especially if it's a big prospect that it's previously struggled. I think like Lucas Giolito, 2019 was the perfect example where he wasn't drafted in 12 teamers, and there were just some people that just kind of felt it early on. They're like, okay, there's something different about him this year, and they got him on the cheap. I remember getting him myself for like $36 in that league, that 12 teamer, and he helped carry me for the rest of the year. So sometimes you just you lock onto those right players, or sometimes you just luck into them. Sometimes it just works. But again, going back to those guys like the Radones, Shoemakers, Matzes, they're these guys that like you're just always hoping that maybe this is the year that they'll stay healthy. They're great waiver wire pickups that can help you for the whole season. But so I don't know if that answers your question exactly, but it's it's just really detailed nuance.
Yeah. So in terms of like the exact number of what to pick, and again, between $36 and $37, it doesn't matter. That's just $1 difference in $1,000 league. But do you have a general rule, or maybe take me through your thought process? So, Kendall Graveman just saved 2 games. Looks like he might be Seattle closer. If you have one closer in a 15-team league, maybe you need a closer, or maybe you have 2 closers and you could use a third one. Why not? Like, what goes into your mind in terms of how much to bid on him? Are you bidding 4% of your budget? Are you bidding 10% of your budget, very roughly? What goes through your mind for that? And then, let's talk about not just closers. How about an injury replacement? What if you have a severe injury on your team that's, guys out for a month? What would you bid on that? What would you bid on a hot player, the hottest player? Oh, my God, Mercedes comes up. My God, he looks fantastic. Are you bidding 10%? Are you bidding 5%? Like, what's your general guidelines for people who listen to the show in terms of how to know what to actually bid?
Ah, man, it's
It's a lot there.
yeah, it's because it's it's a lot more art than science. Part of it is understanding your league, the format that you're in. Are you in a home league and with a bunch of Mets fans that Like, for example, someone just messaged me saying they're in their 12 team, or somebody dropped Michael Conforto, and the first thing I asked was, it's a $100 budget. He's got 80 left, and first thing I asked him, do you have any Mets fans in your league? Because that's important, because that people with their fandom, they will estimate for their league. So once you can get that out of the equation, then you can kind of figure out what the right bid is or what the solution is. In the Graveman example, again, it's context. If you really spend the time, you dig into your own team, you see, okay, I need a closer. Okay, that part is clarified. Secondly, what is his staying power for the rest of the season? Oh, he's throwing 99. He's looking good. He's revamped. There are not a lot of other really good relievers on that team. I feel like he has a stranglehold, or be able to hold that job all year. Okay, he's valuable to me. He's going to be on the high end. I also know, I'm thinking to myself, I really kind of only have one shot to go for it. So then I have to decide, is it going to be for Graveman this week? Is it going to be for someone else that's most likely to become available in the next couple of weeks? You also have to sort of figure out when to shoot your shot. And then the last part of it is figuring out your league mates. You're looking in, okay, there's probably always somebody that's going to bid for a closer. Then I can dig into these teams. All right, who's most likely to bid on him? How much money do they have left? Who are their current closers? What are their bidding tendencies in the past? What have they been spending on this in the past? So all those sort of things, all that science, I guess, turns into art, and then you have to sort of formulate it into a bid. And so I know that doesn't necessarily help people to figure out like an exact number. It's just something that you have to kind of practice with experience, knowing your league mates and knowing what somebody's worth to you, I guess.
Yeah, no, but that really is helpful. And certainly it might be easier at the end of the year because, like you said, you can look at who needs what. If who needs a closer at the end. If the people have closers already and they're not chasing closers, you might be able to get away with a smaller bid, and so on and so forth. Ruvain, what about you? What would you say is the right decision process on the different types of players you could pick up?
There's no right or wrong process. Sometimes you have to go just by your gut. I know you hate it when I say that, but sometimes you go by your gut. Like you're talking about Kendall Graveman being a possible closer for the Mariners. Someone else got a save for the Mariners today, and that was Kenyon Middleton. And he's been a closer in the past. He closed for the Angels a couple of years ago. So while you may want to go after one closer, I may want to go after another one. And you know what? Maybe everyone's going to be bidding for for Graverman, and I'm going to be lucky, and I'm going to end up with the correct closer. So sometimes a lot of it is just luck. Sometimes it's taking your gut and just going and getting lucky with it. Other times you have to understand your situation. Let's say you have a league and you have Adalberto Mondesi, like we have. We have Adalberto Mondesi in one of our leagues, and I knew he's going to be out for at least a month, a minimum of a month. So what do? You have to get a replacement. You have to spend some money on the waiver wire to get a replacement. So you have to try to budget and try to figure out if you first have to find the right person, who's going to have the correct playing time, and then you can say, you know what, he's going to be in my lineup every day for the next month. So he is worth more to me than to other people. So I would be willing to spend more money on him now just for that reason alone.
Can we go back to one thing? Did Reuven, did you say that Ariel hates it when you say you go with your gut?
Yes,
I'm surprised you had me on the show.
He's more
Wrote a gut.
he's more of a numbers person. Sometimes
Yeah.
I do go by my gut more than he does, and it's like you said, it's not a science, it's an art. So sometimes you have to go by the numbers, but sometimes you have to go by your gut also.
I mean, that makes you guys probably a pretty strong force to be reckoned with, the gut and numbers duo.
Yeah, I mean, not that I hate going by gut, but you need to. I think you need to have plans, and of course, you can have a gut reaction and say go off of your plan number, and it needs to be higher by your gut. But I think you should have a base. For everything, just to add to the conversation here, the one thing to think about is that if you've got $1,000 and there's about 26 weeks, call it 25 to make the math, it's an average of 4% a week, right? If it's $4 in a 100 league, it's $40 in a 1,000 league. So that number is important because if you spent that number every week, that would exactly exhaust your FAAB. If you're gonna go hot over the 4% in 1 week, you want to be a little bit lighter the following week. If you don't really see a need to pick up now, save it and only go 1% this week because next week you should feel free to go 7% to make it 8 for the 2 weeks. So you should have that number in mind because I like to budget something for every week. I think that there should be maybe a 3% budget every week that, you're going to have matchup plays, you're going to have pitchers to stream, 3% each week, 3% each week. On top of that, I like to save something for the end of the year, just to have the hammer. And on top of that, you need to have a joy fund, a splurge fund. Hey, I really need to get this one guy. I'm going to do it. Have $150 set for, hey, I need that closer. It's time to throw 75 of my budget right on that guy. Or this is a can't-miss prospect coming up. All right, I'll take the splurge. I would never do a $300 bid. I mean, I think that's a terrible waste of money. But, in some cases, use your bank of free money. Your mother gives you money and you go spend it at the store. Well, you have that for the whole year and take 15% of your whole bank for the FAAB. Use most of it wisely and take the 15% and splurge at a certain point. So I look at that and I make sure that I'm not going way over on a 2-3 week basis. Keep yourself in check with that.
Yeah, and the other thing to add to that, I'm sorry, is also, I mean, if you do math it up, it literally comes down to $1,000 budget. It's $20 per pick per 2 picks a week, basically. So $40 per week, two $20 pickups a week. And there's also a little bit of a sliding scale because in that second half of the season, usually for the most part, everyone's low. There's always somebody in your league who's just like not active or not bidding. They've got $800 or something, and they can drop the hammer on you. But for the most part, most competitive people at that point are like at 250 or under. So that scale of like what an average bid is for somebody good is now kind of dropped down.
Yeah, the other thing I want to say is just that, and I say this in the auction, like, should you nominate players you really want? Should you buy a lot of players early? The answer is that money-wise, it's best to be in the average of the pack the whole way through because then everything seems the same economically to you. Nobody seems too expensive or too cheap because you're in the pack. You do want to be cognizant of that. You should be somewhat in the pack, maybe have a little bit more money. I would always want a little bit more money, but you shouldn't be way above. If everyone in your league spent $400 the first 2 weeks, it's okay to now spend more, right? It's okay because you just want to be economically as close as you can to the middle. Don't be afraid to spend that extra the next time. Or if your whole league is doing that and you know about it, feel free to spend more earlier because you'll know you'll still have more money than them later on. So be wary of where you are in relation to everybody else as you go forth. So again, it's looking at the budget per week, but also looking at where everyone does. I'll spend more in the first half than in the second half, but I won't go crazy. That argument earlier about, a player is used for the whole year if you buy him early, that's true. So you do want to spend a little bit more than you have. And also to touch on, in terms of replacements, if there's a couple of similar players, so if there's only one closer available on the waiver wire, you will have to spend more. If there are 3 closers that may be, you can actually spend less because there's just more of a supply, right? It's straight economics, supply and demand. If there's more of a supply in the room, the money goes down. So be aware of that. In terms of what you have to bid, the quantity of what's available on your waiver wire makes it very important. And the last thing I'd say is injuries. Look at what teams need. If you see teams that are decimated with injuries, you're probably not going to win some bids on some of those guys. Don't bother. Focus on a different area to bulk on. So do look at what your opponents need. That does play into things. Anything else you guys want to chime in on?
Well, that's I think you kind of wrapped it up pretty well there.
Well, there's one other thing I would mention is that when you have a league where it's a 2-catcher league and you have a budget of, let's say, $1,000 and you're streaming catchers, like I know me and you, Ari, we do that, there's no reason to spend more than $1 if you're streaming catchers. If you're spending $10 or $15 or $20 on your second catcher for your team every other week, that's not money well spent. You should really keep the bids as low as possible in that type of situation.
Yeah, if there's a roster spot that you intend to churn with just some kind of replacement every week, you obviously have to be mindful of that and not spend as much on that roster spot because you're going to have to do it repeatedly.
The one thing I'll say on the catchers is I usually do go the extra buck or two, so I'll go 2 or 3 because I always feel like and usually it's a good thing if how it works with waiver priority is if you tied on a bid. It goes to the person lower in the standings, and usually, if other people are lower in the standings, you
Hopefully
don't get that player.
Yeah,
that's why I usually go 2 or 3 because I'm usually looking down.
Yeah, again, it's not much of a difference between 1 and 2, but don't spend 10 on the catcher is the point. All right, time to do waiver wire. That's where we talk about a couple of potential players that we might be picking up and spending on the waiver wire this week. Vlad, let's start with you. Who's somebody that you might be looking at?
I think the just already it's so much changes over the course of the weekend, and by that, even from the time I publish an article on Saturday, on Sunday, usually have to do an update because a lot of times it's who got the most recent save, who wasn't being considered, all of a sudden becomes the hot new pickup. Those things change really quickly. Looking at it early in the week, it really looks to me like. In shallower leagues, I think Yimi Garcia is probably already gone, but if he's not, I think he's somebody who needs to be scooped up. Looks like the closer, especially after Dylan Floro blew it. But I think most people are going to be looking at Kendall Graveman or Middleton and Dolis on Toronto. Those are the people that the catchers that I think people are going to go after. And then just looking ahead at 15-teamer players that have potential staying power for your team. That have 2 start weeks this week. Joe Ross for the Nationals, healthy and looking pretty good in his first couple starts. A couple of could be tough matchups: St. Louis and your Mets in New York. So there's that, and then Josh Fleming, if he can stick in the rotation in Tampa, I think he's maybe not the biggest strikeout upside, but I think he can help with ratios. He gets at Kansas City and then home against Toronto, and obviously Toronto is one of those offenses we typically want to stay away from.
All right, before we go to Ruvain, let's do the Injury Guru's Trivia of the Week.
Well, this week my trivia is going to be based around my waiver wire guy, and I'm going to list the player stats for over the past 3 years, and let's see if you guys can name this player. Over the past 3 years, this player has averaged a 264 average, 8 homers, and 33 RBIs, including one season which he hit 267 with 23 homers and 99 RBIs. Can you name that player?
Yeah, I'm not good at that.
I will give a hint.
Is it Jed Lowry?
Yeah, you got it. It's Jed Lowry.
You guys talked before this. I'm kidding.
No, we didn't.
No,
I'm kidding.
But I already picked him up in another league, and I even played him this past week because like I said, a gut feeling on him. And you know what? He actually hit. He's hitting 333 for the season already, 2 homers, 11 RBIs. He's batting third in the lineup. He's healthy. The crazy thing about it is that a report came out that he requested to have surgery on his knee from the Mets. The Mets said no. He left the Mets. He had surgery in October, and he's fully healthy. He's only 30%, 37% owned in CBS. He's a guy you can grab because you know what? He is a starter. He's batting third in the lineup, and he's getting consistent playing time. I'm going to list also another former Met. That's Phillip Evans. He's on the Pirates. He's only 34% owned in CBS leagues. He's off to a hot start. You want to get that hot player. He's batting 342 with 3 homers, 5 RBIs. He's batting third also. So those are two quote-unquote former Mets who are out there. They're doing well on other teams, and they're getting the playing time, and they're healthy.
I'll mention a couple guys. Wilson Ramos. If you're in a 2-catcher league, you're probably he's probably already taken. But if you're in a 1-catcher league, the guy has 6 homers so far. He's been an offensive bat for the last couple of years. I would take a gamble on stream him. If you're streaming catchers, take a gamble on Ramos. I mentioned Dane Dunning last week. He's still only 50% owned, and he threw a nice game. He's still widely available. Take a chance on Dane Dunning. How about Travis Shaw? 25% owned. Qualifies at first and third. This is a comeback guy. Between 2017 and 2018, he hit 63 homers. He's only 30 years old. That's worth a dart, I think. We mentioned Kendall Graveman. Middleton also got a save, so pick your poison there. And Dolis, we all know about that. How about Adam Duvall? He has 4 homers and 9 RBI so far. That is better than his 2020 pace, which was really brilliant. Picking up where he left off last year. Adam Duvall, go for it, guys. And how about Renato Nunez, another old favorite of our show here. I don't love the ballpark, but he's playing now while Miguel Cabrera is out. He's already hit 2 homers. I once wrote an article calling him the next Chris Davis, and it's because he has a high hard hit rate, high homer to fly ball rate, and he's doing just that to start the season. He's not going to hit you over 230, but he's going to hit you 30, 35 homers. I take a free guy. He's not even owned in deep leagues. Take a stab at him, Renato Nunez.
I was going to throw in, by the way, I was going to point out that Detroit actually has a pretty nice schedule coming up, and just next week they get the Pirates and the Royals. And Nunez, Jonathan Scope's been ice cold. I think he's going to heat up a little bit too. Probably a lot of teams are dropping him. Robbie Grossman. I mean, that team, I think they're kind of a sneaky team offensively. I really like Nunez there, and I think I just like Detroit in general for the next couple weeks.
Let's do our pitcher preview. That's where we pick up some pitchers that might be good 1-star or good 2-star pitchers. Let's start with you, Ruvain, first. Let's see who the Pirates are playing this week.
That's very funny you should say that because just like Vlad just said, Michael Fulmer of the Tigers is playing the Pirates this week. He's only 13% owned in CBS. He's a possible 2-start versus Pittsburgh and Kansas City, both at home. So he pitched pretty well his first time out. He has a track record when he's healthy to pitch pretty well. So he's only 13% owned. He can be picked up in most leagues, and some leagues he may actually even be reliever eligible because he did relieve a couple times last year. Another guy I'm going to mention, Vlad, you mentioned him. You beat me to it. Is Josh Fleming. His first start of the week is versus Kansas City. He's possible 2-start. His first start, he went 5 innings with 2 strikeouts. And last year, he went 32 innings with 25 strikeouts, 2.78 ERA, 1.0 whip with a 63% ground ball rate. And he plays for the Rays. He's only 20% owned in CBS, and he has a chance for you to get some wins, which is very valuable, especially from starters now, which don't go usually more than 5 innings.
Yeah, I was going to say Joe Ross as well. I mean, I think St. Louis Mets, I think it's still a decent start at that Citi Field. But he's a guy that, you pick up for this week, but he's a guy that actually could give you some stuff all season long. I'll also mention David Peterson, who's 40% owned, pitched amazing the other night. 6 innings, 10 strikeouts. He plays at Chicago Cubs. The Cubs are one of the lowest scoring teams in major leagues this season. I think that's a good outing. He looks hot. By the way, does anybody know who has the lowest number of runs scored for the year? Does anybody know?
It's probably the Mets because they didn't play that many games.
Yeah, it's the Mets. 29 runs. They only played 8 games. Yeah.
Well, they're going to Coors, thankfully.
In the snow. In the snow. Yeah.
They may not play on Friday. It's snowing.
Oh no.
Mets can't catch a break. Any other pitchers to add, Vlad?
Yeah. Well, first I want to say, you guys remember Ferris Bueller's Day Off? Was that the
Bueller.
principal Peterson? Right. Anyways,
Bueller.
well, I kind of
Mr. Rooney. Mr.
oh,
Rooney.
Mr. Rooney. Yeah,
Mr.
Peterson
Rooney.
was someone else in the show. Anyways, in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, along the same lines as you guys, and I think I threw out some pictures earlier, but we were probably talking about hitters, so I apologize for not hearing about that. But yeah, Fleming and Ross we mentioned. 12 teamers. Anthony Disclafani is in the mix. Somebody that I actually was a target of mine. I drafted in 12 teamers towards the back end, and it's looked good so far. And obviously, that's a good home park for him. And this next week, he's going to get at Philly, which he could potentially bench for that start. Harper and those guys could be trouble. But the following week, if everything lines up without any rain delays or issues, missed games, he'll get the Rockies at home and then San Diego on the road, which isn't as tempting, but still a possible two-step there. And then going a little deeper, Austin Gomber, up until this 3-run homer he just served up to Justin Turner, he's somebody that is streamable on the road. Obviously, you never play him at Coors, but he would line up for 2 road starts against the Giants and the Diamondbacks, which I think is potentially usable, but only in deep leagues.
Let's do a couple of mailbag questions. Mac Trot says, what to do with Ian Happ? Should I take Haniger for him? I think this is a slam dunk pickup. The Happ is a 63 WRC plus, which means he's 37% worse than our average. He has walked. He's walked 7 walks so far, but he's pretty bad, and he's on a crappy offensive team. Mitch Haniger, 4 home runs already. He's batting well over 100. He had 2 today. 10 RBIs, 10 runs. He's got the 161 WRC plus, and he also leads off. Haniger is more upside. I think it's a slam dunk to drop Happ for Haniger. Anybody disagree?
I don't disagree. Hap is going to have some nice stretches. In the nice warm summer in Wrigley, he'll hit some bombs. He can hit 25 bombs, I'm sure, but he's going to be a detriment to the batting average. Haniger's a much more well-balanced player, and a healthy Haniger, I think, is a much better fantasy option.
You agree, Ruben?
I 100% agree. If that's a trade, you make the trade, you keep Haniger, and you'll be able to pick up Hap later in the season because Hap will be dropped also.
There you go. That's the way to play it. Aaron Evanhouse says, should I hold on to Crone and Jock Peterson? Should I add Alex Cobb? And what's the magic FAAB bid for that, Vlad? So let's go to Vlad first on this.
So Crone, you hold on to. He's off to a slow start. He's not getting cut. I mean, famous last words. Maybe he does, but they're going to need that bat in the lineup. Even though he's struggling, he keeps hitting in the middle of the lineup. He's going to warm up. He was mashing bombs in spring training for a reason, because that's what he does. He hits bombs, and there will be a time in Coors Field where you'll be very happy that you did not drop him. Jock Peterson's a little different because he literally cannot hit lefties, and there will come a time when the Cubs will have to sit him against lefties, and that's just what's going to have to happen because he's a real detriment to batting average. He's got massive power, again, like Hap. There'll be times when you'll love to have him on your team, but over the long run, like a 220, 240 average is really painful. Alex Cobb, great ad. He looks good in that home park in LA, in Anaheim. I think he's a solid ad. Magic FAAB bid, I always need more context. I cannot just give you a number. You got to tell me, show me your roster. I'll take the time and do it, but show me your roster, show me how much money you have left, and then I'll be able to give you a good number.
Well, Ruben, you're a big Jock Peterson fan, so are we holding him?
Yeah, 100% you're holding him. He's a guy who, as soon as the wind starts blowing out during the summer, he's a guy, even if he doesn't hit lefties, he'll still play because the Cubs have nobody behind them and they need some offense. They're going to play him. They got him to play him. He's going to play, so I'm not concerned about that. CJ Crone, again, you saying just like Vlad, I'm just mirroring what he just said. You can't. I wouldn't drop a power hitting first baseman in Colorado. You just can't do that. As for Alex Cobb, I'm not as high on him. I'm a little nervous. He does have an injury history where he's going on the IL at least once or twice a year. So I'm a little bit nervous about that type of thing also.
I'm probably dropping Peterson in a 12-team league, but holding him in a 15-team league. Context is pretty important. Peterson, 136 BABIP so far. 9% homer fly ball rate. I mean, his career averages are more than double each of those. So yeah, just wait a little, give it a little bit time. If he's a big part of your lineup, there's no reason to shell out right now. Let's do one more question. Here's a thought question from Josh. He says, "How do you avoid making early season mistakes due to slow starts, bad luck? I've got the all-ice team of Ozuna, Rizzo, Springer, Story, Teoscar, Altuve, Suarez, and I'm getting more frustrated by the day." So I think Josh needs a little pep talk on relaxing and just going with the punches. Vlad, do you have anything to calm Josh down?
I would look at the quality of those names that you just ranged off. I'm really not worried about any of those guys as long as Springer comes back and he's healthy. He's going to mash. Are we really worried about Trevor Story or Marcell Ozuna? Yeah, Marcell Ozuna scuffled a little bit. Altuve, as long as he's healthy. Suarez, double eligibility now. I mean, this is a monster group, and there will be a time where you'll be really happy you have those guys. Again, we're only 7% into the season. Long way to go, and I would not worry about this group at all.
The only thing I'll say about Ozuna is that last year he was the DH pretty much. This year with the no DH, he's playing the outfield. So could be a little bit of the rust of playing the outfield early in the season. I think he'll warm up, be patient, but I think we expected some of this to happen. And if you can definitely trade for a like quantity, I might do that with Ozuna if you can. But yeah, everybody else just got to be patient. I mean, unless you see somebody, and all the names you mentioned are high up guys, they're getting playing time. They're batting in the heart of the batting lineup. You're not going to throw away your preseason projections after 2 weeks of either bad luck or rust. Just calm down. You can be in last place and right now and win your league. It's everything is just changes by the hour. You have a good hour and you're up 4 points you're up 4 spots in the standings. Don't worry. Ruvain, do you want to add anything to calm down Josh?
Yeah, I'm going to add something else. Me and you, we happen to have a lot of Mets on our team, fortunately or unfortunately this year. It's the same situation. They're not playing any games, so we're falling behind. It's like they're ice cold because we're not getting any of the stats out of them. But people like Edwin Diaz, people like Pete Alonso, you're talking about Jeff McNeil, even Michael Conforto, they haven't had a stretch of 5 or 7 straight games. There's no rhythm. Baseball players are creatures of habit. Once they get into a rhythm, once they get out of the cold weather also, that may play into it also, and once they get rid of this whole COVID, a lot of them are on the COVID list because they got the vaccine, so now they're not playing. So you just have to be patient with these guys. Yogi Berra used to say it's getting getting late very early. So you have to have some patience because it's a yogism for a reason. It's because, you know what, that can happen and you can lose your patience, but you just can't do that. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint like last year. If this was last year, I wouldn't say drop them, but you may want to consider benching some of those guys just to get some active people who are actually hitting into the lineup.
Yeah, that's true. You can always bench a guy for a short period of time if you're really nervous. Definitely don't cut a guy. Remember, regression is a two-way street. If somebody overperforms, it's probably going to underperform a little bit afterwards. Somebody who's underperforming is probably going to go and overperform later. And you certainly don't want to miss when you take all the bad and you miss all the good. You certainly don't want that. And projections are seasonal projections. They're not 1 or 2 week projections. So just hang in there, Josh. We give fantasy advice and we give life advice here on this show, apparently. Ruvain, injury update. I know we've got so many injuries, or should we call this the Toronto Blue Jay update here?
Yes, we will call the Toronto Blue Jay when we update when we get to it. But first, I'm going to start with a couple positive things. First of all, Dinelson Lamet, he was scheduled to throw a 70-pitch sim game today. Hopefully, if it went well, it's possible he can be activated within the next week or two. I'm guessing closer to 2 weeks. Carlos Carrasco, as mentioned earlier today, he's dealing with a hamstring injury. He threw 4 innings and 65 pitches the other day. According to Luis Rojas, the manager, he said he looked good. He did his ups and downs. He's building up correctly. He's going to pitch another 5 innings in a couple of days, and then he should be ready to go. He may be ready by the end of April as well. Brian Hayes, he's had a wrist injury. He has resumed swinging, but he's not faced live pitching yet, so he's a little bit away. Nate Pearson, he's He's throwing at 100% intensity and feels, quote, absolutely pain-free. So that's a very good sign. You may see him also in the next week or two. George Springer, keep him on your bench because he did not travel with the Blue Jays on their current road trip, so he will not be activated at least until April 25th. So just keep that in mind. Continuing with the Blue Jays, Julian Merriweather, we mentioned him already, on the injury list with an oblique issue. You don't know how long that's going to be. That can be a couple of weeks. It could be a month. It could be longer than that. And then his replacement for, I guess, half a day was Jordan Romano. He went on the IL with right ulnar neuritis. This is the same or similar type of injury that Steven Strasburg had, and he ended up needing surgery for it, so he may be out for a bit of time as well. So you can pick up Rafael Dolis. He can close. Also, another guy who's on that team who may close, who has the stuff to close, is David Phelps. You haven't heard about him in a while, but he's an option as well. Continuing with the Blue Jays, Ross Stripling, he was supposed to start today. Today's Thursday, he's supposed to start, but he wasn't able to get his elbow loose, and they put him on the IL with a mild flexor strain. Anthony Kay took his spot today. He may take that spot going forward. Lorenzo Cain, quad issue. He was put on the IL with a left quad issue. He was dealing with that issue during the spring training as well. We don't know how bad it is yet, but Jackie Bradley, Billy McKinley will see an uptick in playing time during his absence. Max Fried, he was placed on the IL with a right hamstring strain, which he injured while running the bases. I think we need a DH. We don't know how bad the severity is yet. Tucker Davidson was called up, but Bryce Wilson may be the guy to fill in there. Christian Pash, another Brave, placed on the IL with a left groin tightness. He is eligible to return on April 24th, but Ender Inciarte will see an uptick in playing time, and he's a stolen base threat, so if you want a guy for steals, that's a perfect guy. Continuing, Archie Bradley. He's on the IL with an oblique injury. They already said he's going to miss at least 3 to 4 weeks, which means that Hector Neris is probably going to be the closer for a while. Kwang Young Kim, the pitcher for the Cardinals, threw an 86-pitch sim game on Sunday this past week. He will return probably within the next week, so he's a guy you want to activate. He's a guy to go for. Christian Walker also placed on the IL with an right oblique strain. Andrew Young was called up, but Asdrubal Cabrera and Pavin Smith will actually see more time in his absence. Anthony Rendon on the IL with a groin strain also. At first, it was considered quote-unquote minor, but now he's on the IL, so we'll see how long that lasts. Dexter Fowler, torn ACL, done for the year. Nomar Razara, abdominal strain, left abdominal strain he got while swinging. Victor Reyes, Jacoby Jones could fill in for them. Joe Jimenez was called up, which is interesting because he could close. That's a guy to watch for. Johnny Cueto, we mentioned him earlier in the show also. He's on the IL with a grade 1 lat strain. It's considered a quote-unquote low-level strain. Logan Webb may fill in. And last but certainly not least, Fernando Tatis Jr. All reports are pointing that he's going to be activated for this weekend series after subluxating his shoulder just less than 2 weeks ago. I happen to think that is one of the craziest things. I spoke to another orthopedist where I work, and I just said this is a 25-year-old who has this issue and everything like that. They said that the person should have surgery, no question. Then I said it's a baseball player. Then she said, oh, well, you know what? There's probably some other thinking going into it rather than just the medical aspect. So I'll just leave it at that.
So last week, Ruvain, we were thinking that he's going to be out for a while, or if he does come back, the chance of re-aggravating it is sky high. Is that your feeling still?
100%. It happened 3 times over the course of 3 weeks. They're trying now. He's trying to swing the bat with 2 hands, keeping both hands throughout the entire swing. Is that going to affect the way he hits? Probably. Is that going to affect his production?
He's going to change his swing?
Yes.
He's just going to change his swing willy-nilly?
Yes, there are videos already on Twitter. You can see them of him swinging two-handed, keeping the hand on the bat, both hands on the bat throughout the entire swing to protect his shoulder. Now, do you want a 70% Tatis in your lineup who may not be producing the way you want, or do you want a fully healthy one? It's damned if you do, damned if you don't. Are you gonna play him? How can you sit for Fernando Tatis if he's active? It's just so hard not to sit him, but you're not going to get the same quality, I don't think, based on what's going on.
Vlad, are you selling Fernando Tatis for like 70 cents on the dollar right now?
It's really tough to imagine that everything's just going to magically be okay with him for the entire season. So I think I might be.
Yeah, I agree. I wrote an article last week basically saying, yeah, go for Gleyber Torres or Javier Baez. Like, you're right with Tatis, your team aggregate risk is high because you're expecting a large amount of production from the one person. If you get rid of 40% of his original stat. Remember, it's sunk costs. He's probably not going to be 100%. He'll probably be 80% at best, 70%. Just get rid of the risk. Get your 70 cents on the dollar and have a stable player. Just do it. Like what's the problem is I don't think people associate the sunk cost there. Tatis is not the Tatis you drafted at 1-2 or 1-3. He's not. He would not be drafted as high today. So why would you not trade him for a nice discount? You know?
Although I will say, I think I might rather have a 60% Tatis than a Javi Baez, but that's just me.
Really?
I don't know, just the play discipline, and I don't know, just not a Baez fan.
Is he gonna steal? Is he gonna steal?
If he can't steal, how can he steal? Oh, you're talking about Baez? Baez is going to steal, but one of the ways that Tatis got hurt was by sliding. When he dove home in a spring training game, he subluxated his shoulder. Now he's changing his swing, he's changes in his mechanics. He's opening himself up to a different injury, not necessarily the shoulder, but of something else, and that's a problem.
If I threw away his stolen bases, you would never draft him in the first round. Like if he said before the season, "Hello everybody, we're not going to steal this year," you wouldn't draft him anywhere near the first round, right? He would be like Nolan Arenado.
Yeah, you would. There's no way because a lot of his value was in his stolen bases.
Yeah, I think
I like your Tatis accent there.
Yeah, yeah. I try my best to do a little bit of accents and impressions on this show here. But anyways, that comes to the end of our show. Vlad, this was a super duper episode. I think that people listening can take another listen and listen twice because there was so much knowledge and thinking through what to do, when to do it, how much, and I think we got a nice flavor of what Vlad Sedler does on a regular weekly basis. And thanks for coming to the show, and maybe you can tell everybody where they can read your work and hear more about what you do.
Sure. It's on Twitter. If you don't follow me, it's at RotoGut, and fantasyguru.com/MLB. It's where all my work is over the course of the season. Do a weekly FAAB article, a very usually a pretty robust, deep breakdown. Spend a good day on it, usually between Friday and Saturday, and then some other columns during the course of the season, and that's it. And I really appreciate you guys having me on. I've got a lot of respect for both you guys, and consider you guys sharp players and great analysts. And thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you very much, Vlad. I really appreciate you coming on. Ruven, why don't you just tell everybody about you?
You can follow me on Twitter at MLB Injury Guru, where I tweet out daily updates on injured players, next guy up, how long the players are going to be out. And I also have a weekly article on Rotoballer for these injuries, just like I mentioned at the end of this podcast. And I also, this week, there's a special addition to this article that I'm actually listing how long each player was out in 2019 based on injury type. So if a player was hurt with an oblique injury, they're out for 35 days and so on and so forth. So take a look at that, and that should give you a good basis as to know how long players are going to be out for injury.
All right, and I'm Ariel Cohen. You can follow me on Twitter at ATCNY. Read my stuff over at Fangraphs, at CBS Sportsline, and Rotoballer. And, of course, you can listen to us right here on the Beat the Shift podcast. Of course, without question, Vlad, we respect your work. One of the best in the business, one of the best NFBC high-money players there is. How many main events have you won, the division titles?
It's been hotter the last few years. I've basically placed first or second in 5 of 6 in the last 3 years. So two championships. So trying to take down an overall this year, hopefully.
Incredible. Well, good luck in that pursuit, and definitely somebody who knows what they're doing here. All right, that's it for us for a Beat the Shift podcast. We'll be off next week, but we'll be back with Ian Kahn in 2 weeks to talk about some hot and cold players and to catch up. All right, guys, see you next time on Beat the Shift podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.